Today's lesson is Out of This World, The Strange Lives of Astronauts. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to continue talking about the strange lives of astronauts. If you want to be an astronaut or someone who works in space, who goes out in spaceships and travels around the Earth or goes to the moon or Mars or places like that, then you have to have interesting things involved with your life. Now, remember last time we talked about the fact that astronauts cannot sleep in regular beds because they'll float away. And so we talked about the fact that they sleep in special sleeping bags that are attached to the walls of their craft, and then they can't be surrounded by carbon dioxide, otherwise they're going to suffocate.
Right. We also talked about the fact that astronauts can't shower. They have to wipe their bodies with a damp towel. That's the only way that they can clean themselves. But these are all inconveniences. These are things that might be slightly uncomfortable, slightly different from the way they are used to living. But there are also some other aspects of the way astronauts live that might impact their health. And we're going to look at that today. The health effects of being an astronaut and also why astronauts wear the types of suits that they wear.
Indeed, that's what we're going to be discussing today. So let's get to it without any further delay. Let's listen to the first part and listen to how space is hard or tough on the bodies of astronauts.
Space is really tough on astronauts' bodies. Because astronauts aren't constantly resisting Earth's gravity like the rest of us, their muscles tend to waste away over time. Their bones, too, become less dense. Just a month in space can reduce an astronaut's bone density by 1%. Lack of gravity also makes the heart more spherical than normal, which can cause it to function less efficiently.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍形容词 spherical， 它的意思是球体的、球状的或是球形的。例如 With the help of advanced technology, people learned that Earth is not perfectly spherical. 在先进科技的帮助下，人们了解地球并不是完美的球形。
So space is really tough on astronauts' bodies because astronauts aren't constantly resisting Earth's gravity like the rest of us. Their muscles tend to waste away over time. So there's something about being on Earth and having to resist gravity that makes our muscles stronger or bigger. But since astronauts don't have to deal with that, their muscles tend to waste away over time when they're in space. So if something wastes away, like your muscle wastes away, it gradually becomes weaker and thinner. I could also say that if a person stops eating food, then that person will gradually waste away from lack of nutrition.
Right. So again, we're saying that space is really hard on astronauts' bodies, or it's really tough on their bodies. If you're tough on something or someone, that means you're very severe with them and you might make them cry or you might damage something. So yes, space is really hard on your body if you are an astronaut. And again, we can also say space is really tough on your body because astronauts aren't constantly resisting Earth's gravity like the rest of us. Their muscles tend to waste away over time. Yes, indeed, every day we're walking around and our bodies are resisting the gravity of the Earth, and therefore our bones and our muscles are getting regular exercise. And if you're floating in space, well, those muscles will waste away.
Yes, and that's not all. Their bones, too, become less dense. Just a month in space can reduce an astronaut's bone density by 1%. So when your bones become less dense, they become less compact. They start to lose substance, which means that they can break more easily. So something that's dense contains a lot of matter in a small space. Or you could say that something has a lot of mass in relation to its size when it's dense. For instance, both water and mercury are liquids, but mercury is a lot denser than water. Now, astronauts' bones become less dense. They become less packed with good things that they need to have healthy bones when they spend time in space.
Yep, so dense here just means a lot of things are in a small area. We could use this word to describe population, the population of Yonghe. up here in the north of Taiwan is very dense. There are a lot of people living in a small area. I guess you could say that about all of Taiwan. The population is quite dense here. Or we could say all of Taiwan is densely populated. That's the adverb form. And then the noun form is density. We're talking about bone density. So here it goes on to say, just a month in space can reduce an astronaut's bone density by 1%. So density, again, is the degree to which something is dense. So your bones will start to get weaker. They will expand. I think I've also heard that your spinal cord will also expand when you're in space, and that will stretch the nerve, and that can be quite painful.
That's not good either. And the lack of gravity also makes the heart more spherical than normal, which can cause it to function less efficiently. So the shape of our heart is somewhat spherical. Spherical means having the shape of a sphere or a ball shape. But when you're in space, it becomes even more spherical than normal, so it resembles even more of a ball, and that can cause it to function less efficiently. So perhaps your heart won't be able to pump blood as efficiently, and that will cause something negative to your health.
Right, so if you look at charts depicting the human heart, you will see that it is not really spherical. It's kind of an unusual shape, maybe like some kind of fruit like a avocado or something like that. But if it's spherical, then it's round like a baseball. And that's not normal. And of course, in that shape, the heart cannot work as well as it usually does. And you might have heart disease or problems with your heart if you spend too much time in space. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's now talk about spacesuits. Hey, if you're into fashion, you've only got one choice of color for your spacesuit. It can only be white. So let's find out what this is all about right now.
Their spacesuits come in only one color. Beyond Earth's atmosphere, there's little consideration for fashion. The suits astronauts wear when they're walking in space are huge and bulky and are designed to protect them from the freezing temperatures and lack of oxygen. But you may also have noticed that these spacesuits are always white. This is because the color white is most effective at reflecting the sun's radiation, which is so strong in space that it can cause severe burns and cell damage.
第二部分我们看到形容词 bulky， 意思是笨重的或是庞大的。例如 The first laptops were very bulky. Now they are slim and beautifully designed. 最早的笔记型电脑很笨重，而现今的笔电很薄且设计很美观。或是 The bulky coat that Trevor wore made him look bigger than he was. Trevor 穿的那件笨重大衣让他体型看起来比实际上要大。再来我们看到单字 reflect， 它是动词，指的是光、热或是声音等的反射、反应。例如 The store window reflected the image of people walking in the street. 该商店的橱窗倒映出街上行人的画面。又或者说 The brooding tone of the novel reflects the difficult circumstances of the author's childhood. 这本小说阴郁的调性反映出作者童年的艰困处境。另外补充这个字的名词 reflection， R-E-F-L-E-C-T-I-O-N reflection， 它的意思是倒影或是反射。例如Amy looked at her reflection in the surface of the water. Amy 看着水面上自己的倒影。又或者说 The business's failure was a reflection of current economic conditions. 该企业的失败是对现在经济状况的反射。接下来我们看到名词 radiation， 指的是光或是热的辐射、辐射能，也可以是辐射物的意思。举例来说 I wear sunglasses to protect my eyes from the sun's radiation. 我戴太阳眼镜是为了保护眼睛免受太阳辐射。再举个例子 Too much exposure to the sun's radiation can cause skin cancer. 过多暴露在太阳辐射下会导致皮肤癌。另外补充这个字的动词 radiate， R-A-D-I-A-T-E radiate， 它有流露、显示情感或是散发、传播，也可以是辐射的意思。例如The old woman radiates kindness to all visitors who come to her house. 这位老妇人对所有来到她家的访客都流露出善意。又或者说 The scientist's influence has radiated into a number of different fields. 那名科学家的影响力 已经传播至好几个不同的领域。最后我们看到单字 severe， 它是形容词，指的是严重的、严峻的。例如 We have a severe problem with the electrical system in our apartment. 我们公寓里的电力系统有严重的问题。又或者说 The news said that we can expect severe weather this weekend. 新闻说这个周末预计会有严峻的天气。
Beyond Earth's atmosphere, there's little consideration for fashion. So in space, no one's going to judge you on what you're wearing, and it's important to be efficient and safe when you're working in space and living in space. So the spacesuit is very important. Now, beyond Earth's atmosphere, the spacesuit is important. Atmosphere here refers to the mixture of gases that surround a planet. So Earth's atmosphere is made up of a number of gases, which include oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, just to name a few.
Exactly. And of course, the atmosphere is that body of air that surrounds the Earth. It could also refer to the general feeling of a certain situation. I could say that my friend Don's birthday party had a very festive atmosphere. Lots of people were having a lot of fun. They were singing, they were dancing, they were eating a lot of delicious food. But here, of course, we're talking about the body of air that surrounds the Earth, or the body of air that surrounds other planets, like the atmosphere of Jupiter or Saturn or of the moon Titan, etc. They all have atmospheres. But here, if you're outside the atmosphere of the Earth, you are in space. And there's little consideration for fashion. I guess they don't run into a lot of aliens out there, so they don't need to impress them with different kinds of colors. Again, the spacesuits only come in one color. So back to the title here, we've got the phrase to come in, which can mean all sorts of things. You could tell somebody to come in if they come to visit your house. Oh, please come in. Move from the outside to the inside. You could also use this phrase to talk about your placement in a race. How did you do in the 400-meter race? So I came in second. I did pretty well, but I did not win. In this particular case, though, we're talking about the color that is available. Of course, if you go shopping for clothing, you want them to come in different colors so that you can choose one. But here, the spacesuits only come in one color. And we'll find out what that color is in just a second.
Yes, and not only do these spacesuits come in one color, the suits that these astronauts wear when they're walking in space are also huge and bulky and are designed to protect them from the freezing temperatures and lack of oxygen. So if you've ever seen an astronaut suit or an astronaut suited up in an astronaut suit, you'll have noticed that the suit is very big and bulky. If something is bulky, it's big and difficult to carry around or to store. You might bump into things when you're wearing it, and you can't really move around very agilely. So these spacesuits are bulky and they're huge. And the reason why they're like this is that they're designed to protect the astronauts from freezing temperatures, because the temperatures can get really low in space. And there's also the lack of oxygen, which means that somewhere in the suit there has to be some sort of oxygen supply for the astronauts to breathe.
I believe the spacesuits are also pressurized because there's no air in space. So if you don't have the pressure inside the suit, you could have some real problems. And yes, indeed, the suits are very bulky. If something's bulky, it takes up a lot of space. And of course, it's kind of difficult to move in such a suit. So astronauts have to learn how to work and things like that if they're wearing a big, bulky suit. And of course, those suits have to protect them from the freezing temperatures and also because of the lack of oxygen. You did mention the word oxygen before. That is one of the gases in the atmosphere. Nitrogen is the one that's most plentiful, but oxygen is there too. And we need oxygen, otherwise we're not going to live.
That's right. So we know that these spacesuits are bulky and they're huge. And another thing, as Roger had mentioned before, they only come in one specific color, and that color is white, as it says here. But you may also have noticed that these spacesuits are always white. Now, why is that?
It's a good question. Of course, the clothing that an astronaut wears in space, especially if they're outside the spacecraft, is a spacesuit, and they're always white. Well, this is because the color white is most effective at reflecting the sun's radiation, which is so strong in space that it can cause severe burns and cell damage. So you need to have the spacesuit in the color white because it can reflect the sun's radiation. So here we've got the verb to reflect. That just means to throw something back after something shines on it. You can see your image reflected in a mirror, for example, when you leave the house in the morning and you want to look your best, you look at your reflection in the mirror. And this particular case, though, in this particular case, the spacesuit is white and that reflects the most amount of the sun's radiation, not to mention the light from the sun. This is also something we apply to modern life. Of course, during the summer, if you want to stay cool, you need to wear light colors because those light colors will reflect the light of the sun and you'll be cooler. And I guess during the winter, if you want to be warm, you wear dark colors because that will absorb the light from the sun.
Yes, and these suits are white because they need to reflect the sun's radiation. Now, radiation refers to the energy that comes in the form of heat or light that's sent out as waves that you can't see. And these waves are dangerous. They could be dangerous. They're potentially dangerous if a person is directly exposed to them for a long time. And that's why we put on sun cream in order to block harmful UV radiation.
Yep, or we could say there was a lot of radiation after the nuclear power plant had an accident in Japan after their earthquake and tsunami and stuff like that. Or there was a lot of radiation that came out of the atom bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki way back in 1945. Some of you might actually remember that. But here, of course, the white spacesuits will reflect the radiation from the sun. And because you're in space, because you're beyond Earth's atmosphere, that radiation is very strong, and if you're exposed to it, it could cause severe burns and cell damage. If something's severe, it's to a very high degree. It's very great. It is intense. Oh, there's a severe sunlight today, so we better stay inside so we don't get sunburn. Or we could say, oh, there's a severe weather forecast today. There's going to be some thunderstorms or maybe a typhoon, so we need to protect ourselves.
That's right. Another meaning of severe could be strict. So you could say that this teacher is very severe, meaning that this teacher is very strict.
Right, so remember, if you're an astronaut, you need to wear a white spacesuit. If you're going out for a spacewalk, I think if you're inside the International Space Station, the color won't really be so important. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson. Let's wrap things up now by listening to the third part.
As exciting as being an astronaut sounds, you can see now that it's certainly no picnic. Knowing all the strange things astronauts have to deal with, would you trade your daily comforts for a chance to explore the stars?
So now we're going to wrap up our talk about astronauts and how astronauts live. So astronauts' lives are not always out of this world. They do have some hardships and some things that they have to deal with. As exciting as being an astronaut sounds, you can see now that it's certainly no picnic. Now, if something is described as being no picnic, it means that that thing isn't easy to do or isn't easy to have. I could say that being an actor seems like it could be a lot of fun, but it's actually no picnic because you have to remember your lines and maybe you have to work very long hours and there's a lot of competition. So that job is really no picnic.
Yeah, this is an interesting pattern, the as pattern. As exciting as being an astronaut sounds, you can still see that it's no picnic. I could say as an example with this pattern, as wonderful as John seems on the outside, he's still rotten to the core, so be careful around him. So yes, indeed, it does sound very exciting. Even though it does sound exciting to be an astronaut, still, you can see that it's not easy. There are all these different restrictions that you need to keep in mind. You can't sleep on a normal bed. You need to wear a white spacesuit. You can't bathe like you can on Earth. So maybe you ought to reconsider your career choice if you're considering to be an astronaut. And knowing all the strange things astronauts have to deal with, would you trade your daily comforts for a chance to explore the stars? That's a good question. If you know all the unusual things that astronauts have to deal with? Well, we're posing this question to you. Would you trade your daily comforts for something else? So this is a pattern here, to trade something for something else. When I was a kid, of course, we liked to play marbles in school, and sometimes your friend would have a marble that was prettier than the one you had, so you thought, I'll trade you this for your marble. I've got this steel marble here. Let me trade that for your glass marble there. Let's have a trade here. And usually, of course, the other kid would say, no way, I've got a great marble here. I'm not going to trade it to you for anything.
Right, or when I was a kid, we used to trade lunches. So I would trade my peanut butter and jelly sandwich for my friend's tuna fish sandwich. That was another trade that often happened in school.
Interesting. Okay, so there you go. There are our things involved with being an astronaut, and there probably are other things that they need to deal with in space, but we don't have time to cover them all here. What we do have time now for is the chance to listen to Hanny, our beloved Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第3部分的第一句写到 As exciting as being an astronaut sounds, you can see now that it's certainly no picnic. 尽管成为太空人听起来令人兴奋，但你现在可以看到这绝非易事。好，那先补充一下 be no picnic 字面意思是不是野餐，那是用来描述绝非易事，不容易胜任，不是轻松愉快的事。像如果我们说 raising a child is no picnic， 就是说养育孩子绝非易事，这不是什么轻松愉快的事。好，那不晓得同学们有没有觉得很奇怪，我们刚刚那个句子里面没有出现 though, although, while, but 之类的连接词，怎么会有那种尽管怎么样但怎么样的语义呢？其实句子里面这个 as exciting as being an astronaut sounds 也可以写作 exciting as being an astronaut sounds。 这个形容词 exciting 后方的 as意思相当于 though， 是表达虽然尽管。那像这样的句型结构，我们用形容词或副词开头，然后加上 as 或是 though， 再加主词，再加 be 动词或动词。那这是引导让步副词子句的倒装句型，目的是要强调句首的形容词或副词。好，那这边要注意2个重点。第一个重点是句型里面呢，我们要表达尽管这个语义的那个词只能用 as 或是 though， 不能使用 although。第二个重点是美语当中呢，我们常常会在要强调的形容词或副词前面加上 as， 所以才会看到课文句子的句首它加了 as， 就变成 as 形容词 as 或是 as 副词 as 这样子开头。好，那我们来练习举个句子会更清楚哦。第一个例句是 Although it may seem tricky, it's actually quite easy. 虽然它看起来好像很困难，但其实蛮简单的。好，现在我们要强调形容词 tricky， 我们先把它移到句首，那就变成tricky, although it may seem。 可是这时候我们就要把这个 although 改成 as 或者是 though， 然后呢 tricky 的前方可以加上 as， 所以这个句子你可以把它写作 tricky though it may seem， 或者是 tricky as it may seem， 或者是 as tricky as it may seem， 逗号，然后 it's actually quite easy。 第二个例句是 Although he tried hard, he couldn't finish it on time. 尽管他很努力，但就是无法准时完成。我们现在要来强调这个副词 hard， 我们就先把它移到句首，那就会变成 hard although he tried。 可是这时候我们要记得把 although 改成 as 或是 though， 同样的 hard 前方可以加上 as， 所以这个句子呢可以写作 hard though he tried， 或是 hard as he tried， 或是 as hard as he tried, he couldn't finish it on time。 好，那以上就是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Dense. Gold is denser than lead, with gold being nearly twice as heavy as the same volume of lead. Atmosphere. A person could not breathe on Mars because it has an atmosphere that is very different from Earth's. Oxygen. Plants release oxygen when they make chemical energy from light energy. Reflect. The diamond reflected the light in various directions, creating a brilliant display. Radiation. Radiation from the nuclear accident posed a serious threat to the surrounding environment. Severe. Mrs. Reynolds was rushed to the hospital when the symptoms of her illness grew more severe.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today, and the question is, after reading the article, would you be interested in becoming an astronaut someday? Why or why not?
I'd still consider becoming an astronaut someday, considering that astronauts go to space. They go on space missions that last a particular amount of time, and then they can go back home and live normally and comfortably.
Well, I would not want to be an astronaut because of all the weird things that weightlessness can do to your body. It can make your bones get all stretched out. It can stretch your nerves. It can be quite painful. And of course, when you return to the Earth, it's going to feel really strange. So I'll just be satisfied to see the pictures that astronauts take in space, and I can imagine that I'm up there with them.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.